When a zombie outbreak tears through the small town of Millhaven, Oregon, 26-year-old convenience store clerk Maeve Calloway finds herself barricaded inside Quickstop with the last person she'd choose to survive the end of the world with, Reid Callister, her most irritating regular customer. Reid complains about everything: the price of ramen, the temperature of the hot dog roller, the way Maeve always gives him his change wrong. She doesn't. He is grumpy, pedantic, and she will absolutely never admit this out loud. Unfairly handsome. Together, armed with a broom handle, 3 cans of Vienna sausages, and Reid's deeply inconvenient insistence on paying for everything even when civilization has collapsed, Maeve and Reid must survive the undead, each other, and the slow, mortifying realization that bickering might actually be their love language. Welcome to Flustered novel, where love is chaotic, confessions are awkward, and every story comes with butterflies, drama, and a little emotional damage. Grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's romance story. The zombie apocalypse started on a Tuesday, which honestly tracked. I had already spilled a full pot of the burnt coffee we affectionately called the morning mistake on my left shoe. The mop was missing, again, because my coworker Danny had used it to retrieve a frisbee from the roof, and apparently lost both the mop and eventually, himself to the concept of a lunch break that never ended. My name tag was crooked, the lottery machine was down for the 3rd time that week, and someone had eaten the last of the granola bars I'd hidden behind the tampons in the stockroom. That was my emergency lunch. My name is Maeve Calloway. I am 26 years old. I have a degree in environmental science that I keep meaning to use, and I have worked at Quickstop on the corner of Birch and 5th in Millhaven, Oregon for the past 2 years. I tell myself it's temporary. My mother tells me I've been saying that since the previous administration. We don't discuss it at Thanksgiving. The store itself is 1,100 square feet of fluorescent lighting and questionable life decisions. We sell approximately 47 varieties of chips, 6 types of energy drinks with names that sound like DJ monikers, and a hot food section that operates on prayer and the lowest possible FDA standards. The hot dogs spin. They are always spinning. I stopped questioning them months ago. They are eternal. They are part of the universe now. It was 3:47 in the afternoon when he walked in. Reid Callister, 31 years old, civil engineer, owner of exactly one facial expression, the kind that suggested the whole world was slightly below his standards. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday at 3:45 for the same thing. 1 package of Shin Ramyun instant ramen, a bottle of water, not the sparkling, never the sparkling. It's pretentious, Maeve, it's just water with an attitude. And occasionally a scratch-off ticket that he never actually scratched in the store. He also complained every single time. The ramen was overpriced. The water was warm. The lighting gave him a headache. The self-checkout played a jingle he found aggressively cheerful. One time he spent 4 minutes explaining to me why the placement of the candy rack near the register was a psychological manipulation tactic, and I had spent those 4 minutes wondering if it was possible to become a ghost through sheer willpower. This ramen is $1.19 now, he said, setting it on the counter with the energy of a man filing a formal complaint with the United Nations. It was 99 cents in March. Inflation, I said, without looking up from the register. That's a 20% increase in 6 months. Wow. You should write to someone. I'm writing to you. You're someone. I'm the cashier, Reid. You're the only consistent employee this store has. You're practically management. I was very much not practically management. I did not have a key to the office. I was not allowed to override prices. I once got written up for drawing a tiny smiley face on the receipt tape. I scanned his ramen, his water, and watched him tap his card with the grim efficiency of a man who resented every cent he was spending but would never, under any circumstances, not pay. That was the thing about Reid that I found the most confusing. He always paid. He complained about every price with the energy of a man who'd been personally wronged by capitalism, but he always paid. Exact amount when he had cash. Card otherwise. Never asked for a discount. Never tried to argue his way to a lower total. He complained and then he paid, which somehow made the complaining feel almost like a ritual. Like a handshake. Like his weird, exhausting way of saying hello. Your smile is crooked, he said, nodding at my name tag. My name tag, I corrected. If you say so. He picked up his bag. I watched him walk toward the door. And then Mrs. Petrova from the dry cleaners across the street lurched through our front entrance with glassy eyes, gray skin, and what I can only describe as very bad intentions. I had approximately 3 seconds before my Tuesday got astronomically worse. I grabbed the broom from behind the register. Danny had found the mop but lost the broom, which looking back, felt like a prophecy, and I did what any reasonable person would do at the start of the zombie apocalypse. I looked at Reid Callister, who had flattened himself against the chip display with his ramen bag clutched to his chest, and I said, "Don't you dare leave me alone in here." He looked at Mrs. Petrova. He looked at me. He looked at his ramen. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I already paid for this." Barricading a convenience store against the undead is not as easy as movies make it look, mostly because the movies never account for the fact that your barricade partner will stop every 30 seconds to critique your methodology. "You're stacking those wrong," Reid said. I had pushed 2 drink coolers against the front door, and was currently dragging a shelving unit toward the side window. Outside, Millhaven was making sounds I did not have language for yet. There were roughly 4 zombified former townspeople against the glass, including Mrs. Petrova, who had been a perfectly lovely woman, and was now pressing her face against the window with what I could only call enthusiasm. "I'm stacking them the way that gets them stacked," I said. "You want the heaviest units as your base. If you put the drink coolers at the bottom and anchor the shelving against them at an angle, Reid, you create a load-bearing brace rather than just a pile." I turned around. He was standing in the middle of aisle 4, holding his ramen and his water, pointing at the coolers with the authority of a man presenting at a board meeting. He had not put down his bag. Not once. Through the entire initial chaos, the locking of the door, the flipping of the closed sign with shaking hands, he had kept hold of his groceries. "Are you going to help or narrate?" I asked. "I can do both," he said. "I'm good at multitasking." He put his bag down on the counter. Gently, I noticed, like it was something worth protecting, and came to help me drag the shelving unit. He was stronger than I would have expected for someone whose primary activity seemed to be finding fault with things. The shelves went into place. He angled them against the coolers exactly the way he'd described, and I hated that it looked more stable than my version. "Don't," I said. "I didn't say anything." "You were going to say something." "I was going to say you have good instincts, just suboptimal execution." He dusted his hands on his jeans. "That's basically a compliment." "It is absolutely not a compliment." Outside, something groaned. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with their usual indifference to human suffering. I stood behind the counter and tried to remember everything I knew about emergency situations, which was mostly informed by a workplace safety pamphlet I'd skimmed 18 months ago, and a disaster movie marathon I'd done during a bout of insomnia. My phone had one bar. The emergency broadcast was cycling: "Stay indoors, avoid contact, do not approach," which was helpful in a confirming my worst suspicions kind of way and deeply unhelpful in a what do I actually do kind of way. I looked around the store. We had chips, approximately 400 bags. Water, 2 cases in the back plus the cooler stock. Protein, jerky, Vienna sausages, a couple of sad pre-made sandwiches in the deli case that had maybe 12 hours of edibility left. A first aid kit under the counter. A baseball bat that Danny had brought in after a scare 2 years ago, and we'd never had occasion to use. 1 broom. Various cleaning supplies that were probably flammable in useful ways. And Reid Callister, who was already examining the expiration dates on the canned goods. "This Vienna sausage expired in April," he said. "Is it before or after the zombie apocalypse?" He paused. "After." "Then it's relatively fine." He set it down with the expression of a man deciding to pick his battles. It was, I would come to learn, a face he made a lot. By 6 p.m., we had established 3 rules. Rule 1. No one goes near the windows without a reason. Rule 2. We eat in shifts so someone is always watching. Rule 3. Reid insisted on writing down everything he consumed so he could, quote, "settle up when this is over." I stared at the little notepad he'd found near the register, the one I used to tally lottery winners, and watched him carefully print. 1x Shin Ramyun, $1.19. 1x water, 500 milliliters, $1.89. Running total, $3.08 already paid. Day 1 consumption, 1x granola bar, $1.49. We'll pay. "Reid," I said. The world has ended." "Presumably temporarily." He clicked the pen. "And even if not, I've used your stock. I'll compensate the store." The store is owned by a man named Gerald who I'm fairly certain fled to his lake house the moment the first report hit. There is no store anymore. There is only survival. "There is always a store," Reid said, with the conviction of someone who had never shoplifted a thing in his life. "And there is always accountability." I stared at him. He stared back. He had very steady eyes. A gray-green color that I'd never actually looked directly into before because our interactions typically involved me looking at the register and him looking at my mistakes. Up close, at the end of the world, with the fluorescent lights casting everything in a shade of institutional beige, they were unexpectedly distracting. I looked at the register instead. "You're unbelievable," I said. "You're not the first person to tell me that." He tore open his ramen packet and examined the seasoning. "Usually means I'm right." We ate the ramen. I made it in a pot on the camping stove I found in the back stockroom, left there by the previous manager who'd been an enthusiastic but impractical survivalist, and we didn't talk very much. The sounds outside had changed. Fewer immediate threats against the glass, more distant noise, the particular quality of a town that had been interrupted mid-sentence. I thought about my apartment 4 blocks east. My cat, Oliver, who I had left with the automatic feeder for a 3-day weekend. Oliver was a gray tabby with the self-sufficiency of a small, furry accountant. He would be fine. He had to be fine. I refused to survive the apocalypse only to discover I'd lost my cat. "You okay?" Reid asked. I looked up. He was watching me with that same steady expression, except there was something different in it. Less assessment. More attention. The kind that notices. "I have a cat," I said, which was not an answer. "Okay," he said, as if that explained everything. "His name is Oliver." "Good name." "He'll be fine. He's very resourceful." "Sure," Reid said. He didn't say of course or I'm sure or any of the reflexive reassurances that feel like a social transaction rather than actual comfort. He just said sure, and somehow that small word, in his flat, certain voice, settled something in my chest. I ate my ramen. It was overpriced and perfect. By day 2, we had, without discussing it, divided the store into territories. Reid had claimed the back stockroom as his operational base. He had reorganized our supplies with the quiet intensity of a man who finds chaos personally offensive. Everything categorized, calorie counted, rationed across an estimated 14 days. He had made a chart on the back of an advertising flyer for a buy 2 get 1 protein bar deal. In very small, very neat handwriting. I had claimed the counter area. This was my natural territory. I knew where everything was. I knew which drawer stuck. I knew that the security monitor had a blind spot in the upper left corner where the camera had been broken since March. I also knew which snacks hit different at 2 in the morning when the world felt impossible. And that knowledge, I was discovering, was more valuable than any chart. We had also divided the night watch without saying so. I took 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., and Reid took 3 a.m. to dawn, which he'd announced by simply being awake and alert when I'd shaken him at 2:58 and saying, "I know," before I'd said a word. What we had not divided. The single sleeping bag I'd found in the outdoor activities section. One of those emergency Mylar ones that crinkled like a potato chip bag when you moved and made sleeping feel like being inside a snack wrapper. There was also a yoga mat from the wellness display, 2 camping pillows the size of a paperback novel, and approximately 0 other soft surfaces. We negotiated this without dignity. "Sleeping bag," I said. "Rock, paper, scissors." "You throw scissors every time," Reid said. I stopped. "How do you know that?" "You've given me change 400 times. You always lead with your dominant hand, and your index finger extends slightly before you commit." He was already unrolling the yoga mat. "Take the sleeping bag. I run warm." I took the sleeping bag. I felt inexplicably like I'd lost something. On night 3, at around 1 a.m., I woke up to find Reid sitting with his back against the counter 2 feet away, notebook in hand, writing in the near dark by the glow of a camping lantern turned to its lowest setting. He was adding to the supply list, or the IOU list, or some other list. Reid, I was learning, was a man who managed anxiety through documentation. "You should sleep," I said. "I will," he said, without looking up. "Go back to sleep yourself." "I'm awake." "I know. You make a different sound when you're actually asleep." I opened my mouth, closed it, processed the fact that Reid Callister had learned the sound of me sleeping. "That's not creepy at all," I said. "It's practical," he said. "I need to know if something's wrong." He turned a page in the notebook. I watched the lantern light catch the angle of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that I used to think was permanent disapproval, and was now starting to think might just be the way he looked when he was concentrating on something he cared about. I went back to sleep. I did not think about his jaw much. We ran out of the good chips on day 4. This would not be a crisis in most circumstances. We still had approximately 312 bags of chips remaining. The problem was that we had burned through all the kettle-cooked sea salt, all the sour cream and onion, And this was the true casualty. Every single bag of the jalapeno cheddar that I had been personally and emotionally relying on. What remained was plain, extra plain barbecue, the mediocre kind. Something called Zesty Ranch Surprise, which had been in the display since before I started working there, and a lime and mango fusion variety that no customer had voluntarily purchased in recorded history. The jalapeno ones are gone, I announced, emerging from the chip aisle with the energy of a war correspondent. Reid was reorganizing the canned goods. I know. You ate 3 bags yesterday. It was a stressful day. Every day is a stressful day. Yesterday was specifically stressful. Something knocked over the toilet paper tower I built for morale. The tower fell because you built it on an uneven surface, he said. I told you. Reid. I held up the lime mango bag. What do we do? He looked at it. Something passed across his face, a very brief, very sincere expression of despair, quickly locked back behind his usual composure. We endure, he said. We ate the lime mango chips. They were extraordinary in their awfulness. We ate them in silence, seated on opposite sides of the candy rack we'd turned into a makeshift table. And the shared experience of tasting something genuinely terrible in the middle of a disaster did something to the air between us. It became briefly light. Reid made a face on the second chip. Not a dramatic face, just a small, private rearrangement of his features. And I laughed. Properly laughed, the kind that comes from your chest before you can decide whether it's appropriate. He looked at me. They're really bad, I said by way of explanation. They're exceptional in their failure, he agreed. He ate another one with the expression of a man making a principled stand against quitting. I'm adding them to the list as a negative value item. You can't put a negative value on chips. I can put whatever I want on my list. At this point that list is insane. You've documented $40 in snacks during the apocalypse. It's $63, he said. I had some jerky this morning. I stared at him. His face was completely serious. He picked up his pen and added lime mango chips, 1 bag, $3.29 with the solemnity of a man closing out his quarterly accounts. Something happened in my chest then. Something small and warm and deeply inconvenient. I ate another lime mango chip and decided not to examine it. On day 6, we found a battery-operated radio in the stockroom. Still in the packaging, one of those purchases Gerald had made that suggest he once thought about emergencies and then immediately forgot about them. Reid installed the batteries with the methodical efficiency of someone who had read the instructions, which I knew because he actually read the instructions, which was somehow both irritating and reassuring. The broadcast was faint but real. Emergency services were establishing a secure zone at Millhaven High School, 4 blocks west. Rescue convoys running through the following day, daylight hours only. Anyone able to move should proceed carefully. I looked at the boarded window. 4 blocks. Daylight. We could do 4 blocks. We go at first light, Reid said. Agreed. There was a pause. Your cat is probably there, he said. The rescue zone. People bring their animals. I looked at him. He was staring at the radio with his arms crossed, face neutral, tone brisk. The same voice he used to report that the ramen had increased in price. But he'd said it. He'd remembered. Yeah, I said. Probably. We spent the evening preparing, packing a bag each, practical and light, Reid documenting the final store inventory with the dedication of a man who planned to file it somewhere official later. I watched him write in the warm lantern light, his handwriting small and exact, the list now spanning 4 pages. You know that list is meaningless, right? I said. Not unkindly. It's not meaningless, he said. It's a record. He paused. Things should be accounted for. Even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. I thought about that. Is that a life philosophy or a chip audit? The corner of his mouth moved. It was barely a smile, a parenthesis of an expression, but it was more than I'd seen from him in 2 years of Tuesday and Thursday transactions. Both, he said. I went to organize my bag and spent a suspicious amount of time doing it. We left at 6:14 a.m. Reid had the baseball bat. I had the broom handle. We'd broken the head off for better grip, and a bag of supplies over my shoulder. The street outside was what I'd expected and still somehow worse for the expecting. Abandoned cars at strange angles, silence of the particular kind that means something replaced all the ordinary noise, gray morning light that felt provisional. We moved fast and quiet. Reid navigated. He knew the streets, the angles, which yards had fencing and which had clear sight lines. And I followed because following felt right in a way I wasn't going to analyze right now. 3rd block. A figure from a doorway. Reid moved without a word, fluid and quick, and cleared the path, and came back to my side. I didn't ask about it. We kept moving. Half a block from the school I slipped. Vet concrete. Nothing dramatic. One foot went sideways. I caught myself on a car hood, but Reid's hand was at my elbow before I'd fully registered the stumble. He didn't comment. He didn't say careful or watch out or anything at all. He just steadied me and kept moving. Except he didn't let go of my elbow. We walked the last half block with his hand on my arm, and I did not say anything about it, and neither did he. And we arrived at the rescue perimeter with my heart doing something it had no business doing after 6 days of stress, poor sleep, and lime mango chips. There were people. Real living non-shuffling people. An emergency triage area, folding tables, familiar faces from town. And near the animal intake area, gray and self-important, sitting in a carrier that belonged to the woman from 14B who was apparently safe and already complaining about the accommodations. Oliver. I crossed the distance faster than was strictly dignified. I crouched down, unlatched the carrier door, and Oliver stepped out and butted his face against mine with the energy of a cat who was deeply fine and mildly inconvenienced by the fuss. He's okay, I said to no one in particular. He looks smug, Reid said from behind me. He always looks smug. It's his neutral expression. I held Oliver to my chest, and Oliver allowed it for approximately 4 seconds before deciding he'd been charitable enough and attempting to climb onto my shoulder. I looked up at Reid. He was watching the cat with his arms crossed and his head slightly tilted, and the expression I was beginning to catalog as his assessing something carefully face. Thank you, I said. I didn't do anything. You did everything, I said. The barricade, the supplies, the navigation, I stopped. You kept us alive. We kept us alive, he said with emphasis. He looked at me. The gray-green eyes, the clear morning light. You knew where the camping stove was. I knew where all the good stuff was. Yes, he said. You did. There was a pause that lasted exactly 1 moment longer than a practical pause requires. I owe the store $67, he said. With the supplies I took for the bag. I stared at him. He held out the notebook. Page 4, final entry neat as always. I burst out laughing. Millhaven recovered the way small towns do, slowly, loudly, with a lot of town hall meetings and one documentary crew, who showed up 3 weeks later looking to interview survivors, to whom I said no and Reid said absolutely not in the same breath. The outbreak had been contained. The technical word for what had happened lived in an emergency government brief that was 50 pages long and deeply unsatisfying. People went home. People rebuilt. The high school gym became a community hub, then a distribution center, then a gym again, which felt like a small miracle. Quick Stop reopened 6 weeks later. Gerald had indeed been at the lake house and had come back looking chastened, and carrying gift cards for all surviving staff as a form of guilt management. I received mine and spent it immediately on jalapeno cheddar chips, which I ate in the stockroom in a private ceremony of triumph. Reid came in on a Tuesday. 3:45. Like clockwork, like weather, like a fact of life. He set the shin ramyun on the counter. He set the still water on the counter. He slid the notebook across. I looked at it. $67.43, itemized. 6 days of survival, every granola bar and Vienna sausage and bag of catastrophically bad lime mango chips, totaled with tax at the rates that had been current before the apocalypse because he had noted in the margin, price gouging in emergencies is unethical. Clipped to the notebook was a check, made out to Quick Stop, signed in his neat architectural handwriting. You're paying the store, I said. I used the store's goods. Gerald is going to be so confused. Gerald should be confused. He left his employees in a disaster scenario. Reid tapped the counter. Also, there's an additional line item on page 6. Personal debt, separate from the store account. I turned to page 6. It said, 1x company excellent. Priceless. Will repay in a different currency. RC. I looked up. Reid was watching me with the careful, deliberate focus of a man who had thought about what he was doing and decided to do it anyway. There was no complaint. No critique. Just that steady attention that had been quietly reorienting my internal compass for the past 6 weeks. A different currency, I repeated. Coffee, he said. If you're available. Somewhere that isn't here. No offense. This is my job. I know. I'm saying I'd like to see you somewhere that isn't your job. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The hot dog spun. Oliver, who I'd brought in that morning and installed behind the counter in a carrier, because he and I had developed a post-apocalyptic codependency, made a sound of general approval. The ramen is $1.29 now, I said. Reid's eyes closed briefly. Of course it is. Inflation. That's an 8% increase, yeah. He opened his eyes. The corner of his mouth moved in that barely their way that I had privately started thinking of as the smile he doesn't know he's doing. Coffee, he said again. Okay, I said. Coffee. He paid for his ramen. He always paid. Coffee was at a place called Hartwell's, which had survived the apocalypse with minimal structural damage, and the proprietor's unshakable conviction that the world always needed a good Americano. We sat across from each other at a corner table. We had talked every day for 6 days straight, in crisis conditions, in the fluorescent half-dark of a convenience store, in the specific intimacy of people who have been scared in the same space at the same time. And still, sitting here with nothing immediate to survive, felt different in the way that quiet always feels different after a lot of noise. Reid had his coffee. I had mine. He had not complained about the price, which I noted with interest. You're not going to say it's expensive? I said. It's not, he said. It's fairly priced for the quality. You're complimenting a coffee shop. I'm accurately assessing a coffee shop. Reid, you once told me our bottled water was an affront to the concept of hydration. It was warm, he said, unapologetically. Temperature matters. You also told me the candy rack placement was manipulative. It is. That's not a complaint, it's a structural observation. He wrapped both hands around his cup. I'm not generally a negative person, Maeve. I just have opinions. You have a lot of opinions. You have just as many. You're just quieter about them. I thought about that. I work in customer service, I said. You develop a filter. You shouldn't have to. He said it simply, without decoration, the way he said most things. Not as a revelation, not as a proclamation. Just as a fact that seemed obvious to him, and happened to land somewhere between my ribs with unexpected accuracy. I looked at my coffee. I thought about 2 years of Tuesdays and Thursdays, Reid at my register, both of us performing the small transactional dance of customer and employee, and how the apocalypse had simply skipped all the slow reveals, had dropped us straight into the part where you know how someone sounds when they sleep, and what they look like in the 3 a.m. half-light, and that they will insist on paying for instant ramen even when the world is ending, because they believe things should be accounted for. I think your complaining is actually your way of making conversation, I said. Reid paused. That's an uncharitable reading. Is it wrong? A longer pause. No, he said. So for 2 years every Tuesday and Thursday, you were making conversation. I was noting deficiencies in a retail environment. You were talking to me. He looked at his coffee. A muscle moved in his jaw. Yes, he said. I was talking to you. Outside, Millhaven continued its slow, steady process of becoming itself again. Inside Hartwell's, the coffee was warm and fairly priced, and Reid Callister was looking at me the way he looked at things he was deciding to take seriously. You're going to keep coming to the store, I said. Obviously. And you're going to keep complaining. I'm going to keep having opinions. And you're going to keep paying for everything, even during disasters. Someone has to maintain standards. He met my eyes. Are you complaining? I thought about it. The chip audits. The barricade critiques. The hand on my elbow for half a block. The word sure that had settled something in my chest at the end of the world. No, I said. I'm accurately assessing the situation. The corner of his mouth moved. This time it was an actual smile. 6 months later. Reid's IOU notebook lives on my kitchen counter. He gave it to me after the coffee date, along with the check for $67, which Gerald deposited with total confusion, and a note to accounting that simply said zombie credit, and which became something of a local legend. The notebook is an artifact now. I'm not sure what category of artifact exactly. Not quite memorabilia, not quite sentimental object, just a small spiral-bound thing that means something we haven't fully named yet. Oliver has decided Reid is acceptable. This took approximately 11 days and a strategic offering of the specific brand of cat treats Reid researched and showed up with without being asked. Oliver now greets him at the door with the energy of a cat who is tolerating someone and would like that to be known. Reid comes in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This has not changed. What has changed is that he comes to the store during my shift and leaves with me after, and we walk to Hartwell's or to the little Thai place on Orchard Street, or sometimes just back to my apartment where I make tea badly, and he makes it correctly and neither of us says anything about the difference. He still complains. The ramen is still overpriced. The water is frequently wrong temperature. The new self-checkout machine has a software issue he has explained to me in full technical detail on 3 separate occasions, And I have written it in the complaint log on his behalf, because he was right and also because watching him try not to be pleased about that is one of my new favorite things. He stopped writing IOU notes. I asked him about it once, whether he missed the ritual, the accountability, the record. He thought about it in his characteristic way, where he actually thinks rather than filling the silence, and then he said, I'm paying a different way now. I let that sit for a moment. Is that a feelings conversation disguised as an accounting metaphor? I asked. It's an accurate statement about value exchange, he said. Reid. Yes, he said. It's a feelings conversation. Oliver jumped onto the counter between us and sat there with his gray, self-possessed dignity, as if he'd been moderating. Reid looked at the cat. The cat looked back with the ancient, unreadable patience of his kind. You're good at this, Reid said. Not to Oliver. To me. At what? Getting through things. He picked up his ramen. Set it on the counter. Tuesday, 3:45, same as always, but his eyes when they came up to mine, were none of the things they used to be. No inventori, no critique. Just open. Just there. Getting through them with people. I scanned his ramen. His water. A bag of jalapeno cheddar chips he'd started buying 3 months ago and claimed were for me. Which was true and also a form of love we were both pretending was perfectly ordinary commerce. That'll be $5.48, I said. He tapped his card. He always paid. And then he waited for me to lock up, and we walked out together into the evening, and Millhaven was loud and ordinary and fully, stubbornly, wonderfully alive. Thanks for spending time with Flustered Novel. If this story made you laugh, blush, or scream at the characters, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and come back for more chaotic romance stories. See you in the next novel.